So let's get into the OCI terminologies to understand these are the terminologies that we'll be using over the coming modules. So you should be familiar with these, and these are actually sort of common across all the other cloud service providers as well. So it's good to know about these and understand what these mean. Oracle Cloud is as of today, live in more than 30 regions, and what this means is, so Oracle is a regional service. Oracle Cloud is a regional service, which means that there is a cloud offering in each of these regions that are shown in this map. The red ones are the commercial regions, which are basically the public ones. These are the commercial planned regions which are going to come up. I think this is a little bit old. From my knowledge, these regions launched recently, like Italy, France. So these are not anymore planned. These are already launched, and there are more upcoming regions. So what this means for us as a user is that if you are in a country, let's say Mumbai, then you would be using the Oracle Cloud offering, which is in the region closest to you. And the reason for that is because of the network and latency performance issues, right? If you're sitting in Mumbai and you try to use something, a cloud service in Toronto, then obviously the latency is going to be very high for any operation that you perform, right? Let's say you want to upload data, you want to create a virtual cloud network. So it's going to be really not so efficient. So you want to connect to Oracle Cloud offering nearest to you. It could be any other region that you want to, but it's just the performance benefits. So as you can see in this graph, Oracle has so many regions, 30 plus regions where they provide the Oracle Cloud offering. Each region, as we will discuss later what exactly a region means, each region has all the services provided by the cloud, whatever you saw in the chart below before, these layers. Each of these are provided by the Oracle Cloud in each of these regions. So you can connect to anyone, you can create an account, you can use these services, and you can host your application and you're good to go. So the OCI architecture, at the fundamental of the core of OCI architecture lies the region, which is actually our data center. We will discuss what these actually mean, this availability domain, etc. Not to get into details of that, but these are the abstract components of a region. At the core heart, there is a physical network which is hosted over compute, storage, database, load balancers. These are all bare metal instances which connect and form the core of the OCI infrastructure. We will discuss that in the later slides, that OCI has a really good latency provided even in their infrastructure architecture that they have built, and that's why within a region the communication among services is really fast. So how that happens, we'll see in the future. So starting with what exactly are these terminologies, there are three main terminologies that we will discuss. What is a region, what is a availability domain, and what is a fault domain. What you need to understand is each of them is sort of comprising of the other. So region comprises of availability domains. Availability domains comprise of fault domains. So what does a region mean? A region is basically a localized geographic area comprising of one or more availability domains. So when I'm saying that there is an Oracle Cloud offering in Mumbai region, that means that in Mumbai region there is an Oracle Cloud offering wherein there are multiple one or more availability domains. So what does this availability domain mean, right? So availability domain is basically a fault tolerant isolated data center. So fault tolerant data center is an availability domain which is located in a region but connected to each other by a low latency, high bandwidth network. So in simpler terms, what this means is that within a region you will have some data centers, and those data centers, they are connected by something called as intranet, which are, so because it's not connected by internet, it's just really super fast network, and the latency within a availability domain is very less. So what is the reason of having these availability domains and what purpose do they fulfill, we will see in the coming slides. But just to understand, availability domains are data centers. And what are fault domains? A fault domain is a grouping of hardware and infrastructure within an availability domain to provide anti-affinity. So what does this anti-affinity mean? That means that it's a logical data center. It's not a physical data center. Physical data center is your availability domain. So this is basically grouping your hardware and infrastructure. So we'll see some examples of this to make this clearer. Before that, let us see what are the guidelines for choosing a region. So you want to pick the region based on these three specifications. The first is the location. Always choose a region closest to your users for lowest latency and highest performance. That we already discussed. Second, data residency and compliance. Many countries have strict data residency requirements, so you need to see what country you are hosting your application in and where your users lie, basically. Because wherever your users lie, they will follow the norms of that particular geographical location. You would want them to have the same guidelines as probably where your data resides, right? Third specification is the service availability. New cloud services are made available based on regional demand, regulatory compliance. So this means that if there's a high demand in some region for, say, some particular service, then new features keep coming up, right? So based on the service availability, you want to select a region. You want to go through the list of regions that are there and what are the service provided. And if you have a specific requirement of some service which is provided in only that region, then you want to choose that region. So these are the three guidelines for choosing a region to begin with. After choosing the region, let's discuss about the three topics, that terminologies that we were discussing, right? The region, availability domain, and fault domain. I think region is clear by now. So the next is availability domain. Availability domain are basically isolated from each other. As we discussed, it's basically a data center, and it's fault tolerant, it's isolated, and the good thing is that it's very highly unlikely that all availability domains will fail together. In case of some natural occurrence like an earthquake or a fire, let's say that one availability domain goes down, then in that scenario, everything in the other availability domain is preserved, and your application will still be running. So this is basically disaster recovery. So what is happening is, whatever was there in the data center availability domain 1 is same replicated in availability domain 2. So even if one goes down, everything is replicated. Because availability domains do not share physical infrastructure such as power, cooling, or bus line, or any other internal availability domain network, a failure that impacts one is highly unlikely to impact the availability of others. Only like if there's some like highly rare unnatural occurrence, like there's an earthquake in the entire city or something like that, then it could be possible that there could be failures to one or more availability domain together, but one or more availability domain going down together is highly unlikely. So this is why it's highly fault tolerant. Now, what does a fault domain mean? Each availability domain has 3 fault domains, not less than 3, not greater than 3, exactly 3. Basically, fault domains act as logical data center. Note that I'm using the term logical within an availability domain. Now, usage of multiple fault domains reduce the correlation of failures within an availability domain. So what does a fault domain basically mean? It just means that if there are storage server racks where you're hosting your hard drives, then there will be no single point of hardware failure. Like the rack switch will not be shared between the servers of two fault domains. So if there's a problem in the rack switch, it would affect only one fault domain, not the other fault domains. So as you can see in the example, if there is one fault domain that's going down within one availability domain, then other fault domains could do the job. And you also have the other availability domains on the other hand. So you have to configure them to make it secondary and primary, such that the updates are happening in all the availability domains in a balanced manner. So in any region, resources in at most one fault domain are being actively changed at any point in time. This means that availability problems by change procedures are isolated at the fault domain level. Yeah, so that's what we discussed, right? Only one fault domain is being modified. You can configure the placement of your compute or database instance to fault domains at instance launch time. So we'll see the example of this in the future in the demo time. We have an option to configure where our resources lie, and once we configure it, it is hard to change that. So the whole goal is, when you are designing an application, right, and you're hosting an application, you want to avoid single point of failure. Now how do you do that? By considering all the things that we've learned so far. So let's say you have an application, and the application is pretty straightforward, right? You have a web application which is connected to a database. So you have an application, a web application, and which is connected to a database. So say you have launched the application in fault domain 1, and you have similarly the rack corresponding to that database in fault domain 1. Now if you have applications that perform the same task, right, the same instances, you want to put them in different fault domains. And the reason for that is, even though they're performing the same task, you want to put them in different fault domains, so that even if one goes down, the same task can be performed by the backup in the other fault domain. So design your architecture to deploy instances that perform the same task in different fault domain or in different availability domains. So instead you can also have the same app running in a separate availability domain altogether, so that in case of this availability domain going down, this backup availability domain will be served the users and your application will not be impacted. So yes, that is how you make your application completely fault tolerant. There's no completely disaster recovery. So you've taken care of the DR. And you have obviously you need to add some data guards, so that you have to make sure that whatever changes are happening in this rack will all get propagated to this, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is about the region, availability domain, and fault domain. So let's recap what we have learned. If you want a high availability design, right, then what you need to do is, so what does a fault domain protect against? It provides protection against failures within an availability domain, right? So within an availability domain, if one fault domain goes down, the other fault domains will protect your application. For availability domain failures, what happens is there are multi-AD regions. Note that, let me go back to the map that I was showing you, right? So in every country, OCI is trying to make sure that they come up with two regions. So there is a region pair that they come up with. So there are two things here, right? So OCI is trying to make sure that in every country there are at least two regions where they are providing the Oracle Cloud offering. And the reason for this is that in case there is some occurrence due to which one of the Oracle Cloud offering completely goes down. Let's say in Mumbai region there is some natural occurrence, and because of which all the availability domains are impacted and the cloud is completely down. Then in that case, there is a backup Hyderabad region which can serve the entire traffic of Mumbai region. And how it will happen that all the resources in Mumbai region will get replicated to Hyderabad, we will see that, how we can do that. And it's quite straightforward. And also, not all the regions have multiple ADs. So, in fact, there are multiple regions which are single AD. So, what does that mean? So, for example, Jeddah is a single AD region. That means it has only one availability domain. So, in case of the entire availability domain failure, there is no other availability domain for backup. So that is something other. OCI always tries to make sure that when they launch a cloud in one region, in the same year or in the coming years, they will launch another availability domain to provide the disaster recovery. So there are many regions where are still single AD, but in the future they will probably be converted to multi-AD. So as we were discussing, right, to make sure that your design is highly available, we need to make sure that we are protected against failures within fault domains, availability domains, and regions. And within a fault domain, we are protected by other fault domains. Within, if an availability domain goes down, then if it's a multi-AD region, there are other availability domains that take care of your application, right? And if entire region goes down, then there is another region pair that will make sure that your application is running. And usually that pair is in the same country where your host application was residing. And on top of all this, Oracle provides some SLAs on availability, management, and performance. SLAs are nothing but service level agreements. So when you launch a provider, right, cloud service provider like Oracle, they have some criteria to meet, like some service level agreements are defined for different cloud service providers, wherein they have to provide some criteria like if you're uploading some data, this should be done in how much time, if you're downloading, what should be the speed, etc. So there are service level agreements defined for each of those criteria, and you can go check them out. But there are some points awarded to cloud service providers based on the agreements that they provide, and I think OCI is amongst the top 5 of the cloud service providers. So that's pretty good, right? So what's the summary? What did we learn? The summary is that we learned about OCI regions, availability domains, fault domains. We learned that availability domains are basically isolated from each other. They are fault tolerant and very unlikely to fail simultaneously. Fault domains act as a logical data center within an availability domain. Usage of multiple fault domains reduces the correlation of failures within an availability domain. Like we saw the example of the rack power switch.